The dead moon of Earth 9 had no business being on any human star chart. It sat at the edge of known space, far from trade routes, far from colonies, far from anything that mattered to the young species called humanity. But the universe had a strange sense of humor, and sometimes it pushed people exactly where they did not want to go. Captain Daniel Cole watched the warning lights flash across his console and felt his stomach drop. The Wanderer was dying. Something had gone wrong with the navigation computer. Something that had sent them spinning off course and straight into the gravity well of a moon that should not have existed. "We are going down," said the pilot, a young woman named Lucy Harris. Her voice was calm, but her hands shook as she fought the controls. "I cannot stop it. We are going to crash." Daniel grabbed the edge of his seat and looked at his crew. There were 12 of them on the Wanderer, a small exploration vessel sent to map the outer edges of human territory. They were scientists and engineers, not soldiers. They had signed up for adventure, not death. "Everyone strap in," Daniel said. "Lucy, give us the softest landing you can manage." The ship screamed as it hit the atmosphere. Fire bloomed across the view screen, and the hull groaned like a wounded animal. Daniel closed his eyes and thought of his daughter, the one he had lost to the war back on Earth. He wondered if he would see her again soon. But the Wanderer did not die that day. Lucy Harris fought the ship all the way down, wrestling it through rock and dust and ash until it slammed into the surface of Wrath 9 with a sound like thunder. The lights went out. The engines died. And then there was silence. Daniel opened his eyes. He was alive. His crew was alive. The ship was broken, but they were breathing. "Status report," he said, his voice rough. Samuel Price, the ship's doctor, was already moving through the cabin, checking on the others. "Bruises and cuts," he said. "Nothing serious. We got lucky." Lucky? Daniel almost laughed. They were stranded on an unknown moon with a broken ship and no way to call for help. The distress beacon was working, but the nearest station was weeks away. They had food and water for maybe a month if they rationed carefully. "Can we fix the ship?" Daniel asked. The chief engineer, a quiet man named Kevin Brooks, shook his head slowly. "The main drive is destroyed. I can maybe get life support working, maybe some of the secondary systems. But we are not flying out of here." So that was it. They were trapped. The crew spent the first day securing the ship and taking stock of their supplies. The moon outside was gray and dead, covered in ash and ancient rock. There was no atmosphere, no water, no sign of life. It was a tomb. On the second day, Amy Grant found something strange. Amy was the ship's xenorchaeologist, a woman with short brown hair and eyes that never stopped looking for secrets. She had been scanning the surface with what remained of the ship's sensors when she noticed an energy signature coming from beneath the ground. "There's something down there," she told Daniel. "Something big. Something old." Daniel frowned. "What kind of something?" "I do not know, but it is giving off more power than our entire ship. Whatever it has been here for a very long time." Samuel spoke up from across the room. "We should leave it alone. We do not know what it is. It could be dangerous." But Amy shook her head. "We are stuck here anyway. We might as well find out what we are stuck with." Daniel thought about it for a long moment. Samuel was right that it could be dangerous. But Amy was also right that they had nothing to lose. If there was something down there, something that could help them or hurt them, they needed to know about it. "We go together," he said finally. "Full gear, full caution. If anything feels wrong, we turn back." The tunnels began 1/2 kilometer from the crash site. They were carved into the rock with precision that no natural force could explain. The walls were smooth and covered in markings that Amy could not read. She recorded everything, her eyes wide with wonder. "This is old," she whispered as they walked deeper. "Older than anything I have ever seen. Whoever made this was here before the Korath, before the Vethany, before any species in the galactic records." Daniel had heard of the Korath and the Vethany. They were among the oldest civilizations in the galaxy, species that had been building empires when humans were still living in caves. If this place was older than them, then it was ancient beyond imagination. The tunnel opened into a cavern so large that their lights could not find the ceiling. Daniel stopped walking and stared at what lay before them. She was enormous, 300 meters tall at least, a figure of black stone and silver light. Her skin looked like obsidian, smooth and dark, but veins of silver ran through it like rivers, pulsing with faint energy. Her face was beautiful and terrible, frozen in an expression of peace that seemed wrong somehow. And buried in her chest were 3 swords. Each sword was the size of a building, made of metal that glowed with inner fire. They had been driven deep into her body, pinning her to the ground, holding her in place. Ancient writing covered the blades, words and languages that had been forgotten long before humanity learned to speak. "My God," Lucy breathed. "What is she?" Amy moved forward slowly, her scanner working overtime. "The energy is coming from her. She is the source. She has been here for hundreds of thousands of years, maybe longer." Daniel could not look away from her face. There was something in her expression that haunted him. She looked peaceful, yes, but she also looked sad. And then he saw them. Tears. Dried paths of silver ran down her cheeks, frozen in time like everything else about her. Whatever had happened here, whatever had put those swords in her chest, she had wept before she fell. "The legends," Kevin said quietly. "I heard stories when we were on the space station last year. The Korath talk about something they call the Sleeping Titan. They say she destroyed whole star systems before they stopped her. They say those swords are the only thing keeping her asleep." Samuel grabbed Daniel's arm. "Then we need to leave. Now, before we wake her up." But Daniel did not move. He stood there, staring at those silver tears, and he felt something he had not felt in a long time. The legend said she was a monster. The legend said she had killed billions. But monsters did not cry. Monsters did not weep before they fell. What if the legends were wrong? Amy seemed to be thinking the same thing. She had moved closer to the nearest sword, reading the inscriptions with growing confusion. "These are not just warnings," she said slowly. "They are bindings. Ritual bindings. Whoever put these swords here did not just want to stop her. They wanted to trap her, to keep her conscious but paralyzed, to make her suffer." The words hung in the air like smoke. Daniel thought of his daughter again, of how she had died in a war that never should have happened, a war built on lies and fear. He thought of how history was written by winners, how monsters were often just the people who lost. He looked at the Titan's face, at her closed eyes and silver tears, and he made a decision. He would find the truth. The days that followed were strange ones for the crew of the Wanderer. They had come to map stars, and instead found themselves standing in the presence of something beyond their understanding. The Titans slept beneath the moon, and the humans above worked to survive. Kevin managed to get some of the ship's systems running again. Life support was stable. The distress beacon was sending its signal into the void. But the main engines were dead, and no amount of clever repair work was going to bring them back. They were still trapped. Amy spent every waking hour in the cavern below. She had brought down portable lights and scanning equipment, turning the ancient space into a research station. The rest of the crew thought she was obsessed. Daniel thought she was looking for answers that no one else wanted to find. "I found something," she told him on the 5th day. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but they burned with excitement. "The inscriptions on the swords are not the only writing down here. There are older markings, hidden beneath layers of stone. Someone tried to erase them, but they did not do a good enough job. Daniel followed her down into the cavern. The Titan had not moved, of course. She lay there, as she had for centuries, the three great swords pinning her to the ground. But Amy led him past the sleeping giant to a section of wall near the back of the chamber. "Look here," she said, pointing her light at a series of faded symbols. "These are different from the sword inscriptions. Older, much older. I think they were written by her people." "Her people?" Daniel frowned. "I thought she was the only one." "She is now. But she was not always." Amy pulled out her datapad and showed him the translation she had been working on. "These symbols tell a story. They call themselves the architects. They say they were the first, the ones who came before all others. They seeded life across the galaxy. They watched over the young races as they grew." Daniel read the words on the screen, his frown deepening. "Seeded life? Like gardeners?" "Exactly like gardeners. They created the conditions for life to evolve. They guided it, protected it, helped it grow. According to these records, every intelligent species in the galaxy exists because of them." This did not match the legends. The Korath had said the Titan was a destroyer, a monster that had burned worlds for pleasure. But these records painted a very different picture. "What happened to them?" Daniel asked. "The other architects, I mean. Where did they go?" Amy's face went dark. "That is where it gets bad. The records say the younger races turned on them. The species they had created grew jealous of their power. They wanted the architects' technology, their knowledge, their ability to shape life itself. When the architects refused to give it freely, the younger races formed an alliance. An alliance to do what? To kill them. All of them. The records call it the Great Betrayal. One by one, the architects were hunted down and destroyed. Their cities were burned. Their worlds were shattered. Their children were murdered in front of them." Amy paused, her voice thick. She was the last one, the only survivor. She tried to fight back, to protect what remained of her people. But it was too late. They were already gone. Daniel stood in silence, staring at the faded symbols on the wall. He had been a soldier once, before he became a captain. He had seen what people did when they were afraid, when they wanted something they could not have. This story was old and alien, but it was also terribly familiar. "The swords," he said slowly. "The legends say 100 species worked together to forge them. They say it took 10,000 sacrifices to bind her." Amy nodded. "The inscriptions on the swords confirm that. But there is something the legends do not mention. The binding was not designed to kill her. It was designed to keep her alive, conscious, feeling everything, for eternity." Daniel felt sick. He thought of all the old stories about monsters and heroes, about great evils defeated by brave warriors. He had grown up believing those stories. Everyone had. But now he stood in front of the truth, and it was uglier than any legend. "She did not attack them first," he said. "She was defending herself. Defending what was left of her people. Yes, and when she lost, they did not just kill her. They made her suffer. They wanted her to hurt forever as punishment for fighting back." Amy looked at the sleeping Titan, and there were tears in her eyes. "She has been awakened there, Daniel. For 400,000 years, she has been trapped in her own body, feeling those swords in her chest, unable to move or speak or die. Can you imagine what that would be like?" Daniel could not imagine it. No one could. The horror of it was too big to fit inside a human mind. That night, he could not sleep. He lay in his bunk on the broken ship and stared at the ceiling, thinking about monsters and victims and the lies that history told. He thought about his daughter, about the war that had taken her, about the enemy he had been taught to hate. After she died, he had learned the truth about that war too. He had learned that the enemy was not evil, just different. He had learned that his own government had lied to justify the killing. Was this any different? The Galactic Council told everyone that the Titan was a monster. The Korath warned every species to stay away from Barath 9. But what if they were the real monsters? What if the Titan was just a victim, trapped by those who feared her? Daniel got out of bed and put on his suit. He walked through the silent ship, past his sleeping crew, and out onto the surface of the dead moon. The stars above were cold and distant, and he felt very small beneath them, but he knew what he had to do. He made his way to the cavern entrance and descended into the darkness. The Titan lay where she had always been, her face peaceful, her tears frozen. The three swords glowed with faint light, and Daniel could almost feel the power radiating from them. He walked up to the first sword dot. It was massive, taller than any building on Earth. The metal was warm to the touch, and he could feel vibrations running through it like a heartbeat. The inscriptions warned him to stay back, to leave her bound, to fear what she might do if freed. But Daniel was done with fear. He had lost too much to it already. He put his hands on the hilt of the sword and pulled Dot at first. Nothing happened. The blade was buried deep, held in place by ancient magic and the weight of centuries. Daniel pulled harder, his muscles screaming, his breath coming in ragged gasps, and then it moved. The sword slid free an inch, then 2, then 3. Light erupted from the wound, silver and blinding. The ground shook. The walls of the cavern cracked. Somewhere far above, on 1,000 different worlds, alarms began to sound. Daniel did not stop. He pulled with everything he had, with all the anger and grief and desperate hope that had been building inside him since he first saw her tears. The sword came free with a sound like thunder, dissolving into light the moment it left her flesh. Daniel flew backward and hit the stone floor hard. He felt bones break. He tasted blood. But he did not look away from her face, because her eyes were opening. They were golden, those eyes. Not the red of a demon or the black of a monster. They were golden like sunrise, like honey, like hope. And they were filled with so much pain that Daniel wanted to weep. She drew breath for the first time in 400,000 years. The sound echoed through the cavern like music, like grief, like the cry of a newborn child. And then she spoke, not with words, but with thoughts. Her voice filled his mind, gentle and sad and impossibly old. She asked him one question. Why? Why had he freed her? Daniel lay on the ground, broken and bleeding. And he told her the truth, because no one deserved eternal torment, because he had seen her tears, because humanity had learned, through all its painful history, that the ones we call monsters are sometimes just the ones we fear. The Titan looked at him for a long moment. Her golden eyes searched his face, reading something there that he could not name. And then she did something that no legend had ever mentioned. She smiled. The crew of the Wanderer came running when they felt the ground shake. They found their captain lying on the cavern floor with broken ribs and blood on his lips. They found the first sword gone, dissolved into nothing. And they found her awake, sitting up for the first time in 400,000 years, her golden eyes watching them with an expression none of them could read. Samuel reached Daniel first. "What have you done?" the doctor demanded as he checked his captain's wounds. "What have you done?" Daniel coughed and tasted blood. "The right thing, I hope." The Titan watched them without moving. 2 swords still pierced her chest, glowing with that strange inner fire, and silver blood leaked from the wounds. She was massive, terrifying, something out of nightmare and legend. But she did not attack. She did not even stand. Amy stepped forward slowly, her hands raised to show she meant no harm. "Can you understand us?" she asked. "Do you know where you are?" The Titan's voice filled their minds again, that strange music of thought and feeling. She said she understood. She said she knew where she was. She had been awake the whole time, after all. Awake and watching and waiting for someone to show mercy. 400,000 years, Lucy whispered. You have been conscious for 400,000 years? Yes. The word was simple, but the weight of it was crushing. 400,000 years of paralysis, of agony, of being trapped in her own body, while the universe moved on without her. None of them could truly grasp what that meant. The human mind was not built for such suffering. Kevin helped Samuel lift Daniel onto a makeshift stretcher. The captain was injured badly, but he refused to leave the cavern. I need to know, he said through gritted teeth. I need to know who she really is. The Titan's golden eyes softened. She told him her name was Sira. She told him she was an architect, the last of a race that had once filled the galaxy with life. She told him the story that Amy had already pieced together from the ancient records, but she told it in full, with all the details that time had erased. Her people had been old when the first stars were young. They had shaped the cosmos, seeding planets with the building blocks of life, guiding evolution along paths that led to intelligence and wonder. They had loved their creations like children, watching them grow and learn and reach for the stars. But children do not always love their parents. The younger races grew strong, and with strength came hunger. They wanted what the architects had. They wanted their power, their knowledge, their ability to create and destroy. When the architects refused, the younger races formed the Grand Coalition. Sarah's voice grew heavy with grief as she described what came next. The coalition had not fought fairly. They had used betrayal and ambush, striking when the architects were scattered and vulnerable. One by one, her brothers and sisters fell. Their cities burned. Their worlds died. Their children were slaughtered before their eyes. Sarah had been the youngest of the architects, the gentlest. She had never wanted to fight. But when her family was murdered, when everything she loved was taken from her, she had raged. She had struck back with all the power of a dying god, and for a brief moment, the coalition had known fear. But it was not enough. There were too many of them, and only one of her. They forged the 3 swords from the hearts of dying stars, and they bound them with the souls of 10,000 sacrifices. They drove the blades into her chest and left her here, on this dead moon, to suffer forever. The worst part, she told them, was that she had begged. At the end, when she knew she could not win, she had surrendered. She had asked for death, for mercy, for anything but this. They had laughed. They had called her a monster, had written legends about her evil, had made her the villain of their history. And then they had walked away and left her screaming. When Sarah finished her story, no one spoke. The humans stood in the ancient cavern with tears on their faces, and they understood why their captain had pulled the sword. Samuel broke the silence first. Can we help you? Is there anything we can do? Sarah looked at him with something like wonder. She said she had expected hatred. She had expected fear. For 400,000 years, every species that found her had run away or tried to destroy her completely. No one had ever offered help. We are human, Amy said simply. We know what it is like to be called monsters by those who fear us. We know what it is like to have our history rewritten by our enemies. Daniel pushed himself up on the stretcher, ignoring Samuel's protests. The other 2 swords, he said. Can we remove them? Sarah shook her head slowly. The swords were bound by powerful magic, tied to the souls that had been sacrificed to create them. Removing them would release those souls, and she was not sure what would happen. The beings who had been killed to forge the swords had been deceived. They had been promised glory and given only darkness. Their spirits might be angry. They might be dangerous. Then we leave them for now, Daniel said. But we stay with you. We learn. We figure out what comes next. Kevin cleared his throat nervously. Captain, The distress beacon is still broadcasting. Eventually, someone is going to come. And when they find out what happened here, he did not need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew what the Galactic Council would do when they learned that a human had freed the sleeping Titan. Syrah's golden eyes turned toward the distant stars, toward the civilizations that had condemned her so long ago. She said she could feel them already, feel the ripples of fear spreading across the galaxy. They would come for her. They would try to bind her again, or destroy her completely. "Let them come," Daniel said. His voice was weak, but his eyes were hard. "They have lied about you for 400,000 years. It is time someone told the truth." Over the days that followed, Syrah healed Daniel's injuries with a touch of her hand. Her power was diminished but not gone, and she used what remained to repair the damage she had caused when she woke. The crew of the Wanderer stayed with her, learning her history, recording her words, preparing for what was coming. Amy discovered that Syrah could project images directly into their minds, memories of times long past. She showed them the glory of the architects, the worlds they had created, the love they had felt for the life they nurtured. She showed them the great betrayal, the hunting and the killing and the fire. She showed them her own final battle, her surrender, her imprisonment. But she also showed them something else, something the legends had never mentioned died in her last moments of freedom. Before the swords fell, Syrah had looked at her enemies and asked them a question. She had asked them if they truly believed she was a monster, or if they simply wanted what she had. None of them had answered. That silence had haunted her for 400,000 years. "They knew," Kevin said quietly after seeing the memory. "They knew you were innocent, and they did it anyway." Syrah nodded. Innocence had never mattered to them. Power had. Greed had. Fear had. But not innocence. Lucy stared at the 2 remaining swords in Syrah's chest, at the silver blood that leaked endlessly from the wounds. "Does it hurt?" she asked softly. "Every moment," Syrah replied. "Every moment for 400,000 years." Lucy wiped her eyes and looked at her captain. "What do we do?" she asked. "When the fleet comes, what do we do?" Daniel Cole looked at the Titan who should have been a monster and saw only a victim. He looked at his crew, small and fragile and human, and he saw something that the great civilizations of the galaxy had forgotten. Courage. "We tell the truth," he said, "and we stand beside her when she faces them." Syrah's golden eyes met his, and for a moment, something passed between them. Not words, but understanding. 2 beings who had lost everything, who had been broken by forces beyond their control, who had found each other in the darkness of a dead moon. She asked him if he was afraid. Daniel smiled. "Always," he said, "but that never stopped us before." The Galactic Fleet arrived on the 14th day, 112. Warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and filled the sky above. Vareth 9. They came from 18 different species. Ancient empires that had been sailing the stars when humanity was still learning to make fire. Their weapons could crack planets. Their shields could withstand the heat of suns. They had come to destroy what should never have been freed. Admiral Kethril of the Korath stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at the sensor readings with cold eyes. The sleeping Titan was awake. After 400,000 years, the nightmare had returned. His ancestors had helped forge the swords that bound her. His people had sworn oaths to ensure she never woke. And now some foolish creature had undone centuries of sacrifice. "Find the humans," he ordered. "Find them and destroy them. Then we will deal with the Titan." His officers moved to obey, but before they could fire a single shot, something strange happened. A signal began broadcasting from the surface of the moon, a frequency that cut through every communication system in the fleet. Images filled the view screens of every ship. Images that no one in the coalition had ever seen. the truth. Sira had decided to show the galaxy what really happened 400,000 years ago. The images began with beauty. The architects in their glory, vast beings of light and power who shaped worlds with their thoughts. They showed the young races being born, crawling out of primordial seas, reaching for the stars with trembling hands. They showed the architects watching over them, protecting them, loving them like parents love their children. Then the images grew dark. The betrayal came without warning. Ambassadors who had smiled and bowed suddenly drew weapons. Allies revealed themselves as enemies. The architects were caught off guard, scattered across the galaxy, unable to defend themselves. One by one, they fell. Admiral Cathrall watched in silence as his ancestors appeared on the screen. He saw them laughing as they killed. He saw them taking trophies from the bodies of the fallen. He saw them dividing the spoils, the technology, the knowledge, the power that had been denied them. He saw the truth of his people's founding myth crumble into ash. The images continued. Sira's brothers and sisters dying. Her children murdered before her eyes. Her final stand, not an attack but a defense. A desperate attempt to protect what remained of her people. Her surrender. Her begging. Her tears. And then the swords. The coalition had told themselves they were heroes. They had written legends about brave warriors defeating a monster. But the images showed what really happened. 10,000 beings sacrificed against their will, their souls torn from their bodies and forged into weapons. Sira pinned to the ground, screaming, as the blades were driven through her chest. The coalition leaders standing over her, not victorious but cruel, explaining in detail how she would suffer forever. When the broadcast ended, the fleet was silent. Some of the younger officers were weeping. They had grown up believing the stories, believing their ancestors were noble and good. Now they knew the truth, and it was too heavy to bear. But not everyone felt shame. Admiral Cathrall's hands tightened on his command console. His jaw clenched. His eyes, which had shown a moment of doubt, hardened again. "Lies," he said quietly. "Propaganda from a desperate monster. She is trying to confuse us, to make us hesitate." "Admiral," one of his officers spoke carefully, "the signal includes data verification. The timestamps, the location markers, the energy signatures. They can be verified independently. This is real footage, not fabrication." The Admiral turned on his officer with cold fury. "Are you suggesting that our entire civilization is built on a lie? That everything we have accomplished, everything we have become, was paid for with the blood of innocents?" The officer did not answer. He did not need to. From another ship in the fleet, a Vithini commander opened a channel. "Admiral Cathrall, my people are requesting withdrawal. We cannot be part of this. Not after what we have seen." "You will stay," Cathrall growled. "The coalition was sworn to contain this threat forever. We cannot abandon that oath now. The oath was sworn to contain a monster. But she is not a monster. She is a victim." The argument spread across the fleet like fire. Some commanders agreed with the Admiral, insisting that the broadcast was manipulation, that the Titan had to be destroyed no matter what she claimed. Others demanded withdrawal, demanding answers, demanding justice for crimes committed 400,000 years ago. While the coalition argued, Daniel Cole walked out onto the surface of VEL Wrath-9. He wore his environmental suit, a small figure beneath the massive shapes of the warships above. Beside him walked Sira, risen fully for the first time since her imprisonment. She was 300 meters tall, a being of darkness and silver light, and the two remaining swords still pierced her chest. Silver blood dripped from her wounds and turned to stars as it fell. She could have destroyed the fleet. Everyone knew it. The archives spoke of her power, how she had unmade armadas during her final stand. She could have reached up and crushed them like insects, but she did not. Instead, she stood on the surface of the dead moon and waited. Admiral Kethrel made his decision. All ships, open fire. The first volley struck Velrith 9 with enough force to shatter a continent. Fire bloomed across the surface, and the ground shook with the impact. Daniel was thrown from his feet, his suit's shields barely protecting him from the blast. When the dust cleared, the moon was intact. Sarah had raised her hand, and the attack had stopped dead in the air. The energy hung there like frozen lightning, beautiful and terrible. She held it for a moment, showing them what she could do. And then she let it dissipate harmlessly into space. A message filled the minds of everyone in the fleet. Gentle and sad, she told them she did not want to fight. She had spent 400,000 years in agony, and she was tired. She had lost everything that mattered, everyone she loved, every hope she had ever held. She had no desire for revenge. She just wanted peace, but she also said she would not let them hurt the humans. They had shown her mercy when no one else would. They had freed her when every other species in the galaxy had left her to suffer. She would protect them, no matter the cost. The fleet hesitated. Daniel pushed himself to his feet and looked up at Syrah's massive form. Even now, with the most powerful weapons in the galaxy pointed at her, she was not attacking. She was trying to find another way. He activated his communication system and broadcast to the fleet. "I am Daniel Cole, captain of the human vessel Wanderer. I am the one who freed her. I did it because I saw her tears. I did it because I learned the truth about what happened here. And I would do it again." His voice carried across the void to every ship, every bridge, every being in the Coalition fleet. "You call her a monster, but she is not the one who murdered children. She is not the one who slaughtered an entire species for power. She is not the one who forged souls into weapons. That was you. Your ancestors. Your heroes." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Humanity is young. We have only been among the stars for a short time. But we have learned one thing in our history. We have learned that the story the winners tell is not always the truth. We have learned that monsters are often just the people who lost." Admiral Kethrel's voice cut across the channel, hard and angry. "You know nothing, human. You have no idea what she is capable of." "I know she could have destroyed your fleet by now," Daniel replied. "I know she has chosen not to. That tells me everything I need to know." The fleet hung in space, weapons charged but silent. The truth broadcast had shaken them. Daniel's words had shaken them further. And now they faced a choice that would define the future of the galaxy, destroy the Titan, and live with the knowledge of what they had. Or admit that their entire civilization was built on a crime. The silence stretched on, and the stars watched, and the galaxy held its breath. The standoff lasted 3 days. Ships came and went as the Coalition fractured. The Vethni withdrew their vessels first, unable to bear the weight of what they had learned. Others followed, their crews demanding answers that their leaders could not give. By the end of the second day, Admiral Kethrel commanded less than half the force he had arrived with, but half was still enough to destroy a world. And the Admiral was determined. "She's manipulating you," he broadcast to the remaining ships. "She is using the humans as shields, playing on your guilt. We cannot let 400,000 years of sacrifice be for nothing." Some agreed with him. Some did not. The arguments continued, growing more heated with each passing hour. The galaxy watched through news feeds and intercepted signals, and everyone had an opinion on the surface of Velrith 9. Daniel sat beside Sarah and watched the stars. "You could end this," he said quietly. "You could destroy them and no one could stop you." Sarah's golden eyes turned to him, sad and wise. She said she had thought about it. For 400,000 years, she had dreamed of revenge. She had imagined what she would do when she was free, how she would make them pay for every moment of suffering. The anger had been the only thing keeping her sane. But then, Daniel had pulled the sword. He had looked at her not with fear or hatred, but with compassion. He had freed her not for power or gain, but because he believed no one deserved eternal torment. And in that moment, all her dreams of revenge had crumbled into dust, because revenge was not justice. Revenge was just more pain, more death, more suffering passed from one generation to the next. Her people had been destroyed by beings who feared what they did not understand. If she became a destroyer in turn, she would prove them right. She would become the monster they had always claimed she was. Then what do we do? Daniel asked Dot. She did not answer. Instead, she reached up and touched the second sword in her chest. Daniel lunged forward, but he was too slow. Sarah gripped the hilt and pulled, and the blade came free with a sound like breaking glass. Light exploded from the wound, silver and blinding, and Daniel felt something brush past him. Something that was not quite alive, but not quite dead either. The souls trapped in the sword. They rose like stars, 10,000 lights ascending from the blade as it dissolved. They had been prisoners too, deceived into sacrifice, bound to the weapon for millennia. Sarah had freed them, and now they spiraled upward into the void, finally at peace. But they did not all go quietly. Some of the souls paused. They turned toward the coalition fleet, toward the descendants of those who had sacrificed them. For a terrible moment, Daniel thought they would attack, that they would seek their own revenge. Sarah spoke to them, not with words, but with something deeper. She showed them her own journey, her own choice to let go of hatred. She asked them to do the same. She told them that the living should not pay for the crimes of the dead. That vengeance was a chain that bound the victim as surely as the oppressor. One by one, the souls listened. One by one, they released their anger and rose into the light. When the last of them was gone, the second sword had vanished completely. Only one remained. Sarah looked at Daniel with exhaustion in her eyes. 2 wounds now leaked silver blood, and her light had dimmed. Freeing the souls had cost her, but she did not regret it. "The last sword," Daniel said. "Are you going to pull it too?" She shook her head slowly. She said she would keep it, not as a weapon, but as a memorial. A reminder of what had been done, of what must never be done again. The souls in the last sword had been the most devoted of the sacrifices, the ones who had believed most deeply in the righteousness of their cause. They needed to see that things had changed before they could find peace. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Kethril watched the souls rise and felt something crack inside him. He had told himself he was protecting the galaxy. He had told himself the Titan was a threat that had to be contained. But watching those lights ascend, watching prisoners finally find freedom after millennia of darkness, he could no longer pretend. His ancestors had not been heroes. They had been murderers. And he had almost murdered again in their name. The Admiral closed his eyes and took a breath. When he opened them again, something had changed. "All ships, stand down," he said quietly. "Lower weapons. We are leaving." His officers stared at him in shock. "Admiral?" I said, "Stand down." His voice was heavy with the weight of revelation. "We came here to fight a monster. But the only monsters here are the ones we see in the mirror." The remaining coalition ships powered down their weapons and began to withdraw. It was not surrender, not exactly. It was something more complicated. It was the first step of a very long journey. Sarah watched them go with something like hope in her eyes. Daniel stood beside her, small and fragile and human. "What happens now?" he asked. She told him she did not know. The galaxy had changed in ways that could not be undone. The truth was out, spreading across the stars, rewriting history with every telling. Civilizations that had stood for millions of years would have to reckon with the crimes of their founders. Old alliances would crumble. New ones would form. But she also told him something else. something that mattered more than politics or power. She knelt down, lowering her massive form until her golden eyes were level with his. She told him that in 400,000 years of suffering, she had never lost hope entirely. She had always believed that somewhere in the vast cosmos, there must be beings capable of mercy. Beings who could look at a monster and see a victim. Beings who could choose compassion over fear. Humanity had proven her right. She named him friend. Not servant, not ally, not tool. Friend. The first friend she had made in 400,000 years. And then she did something more. She named humanity the inheritors of the architect's purpose. The new gardeners of life. Not because they were powerful, not because they were wise, but because they had the one quality that mattered most. They could see past fear. Daniel looked up at her, at this ancient being of light and shadow, and he felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. It was a heavy gift, a responsibility that humanity might not be ready for. But then again, they had never been ready for anything. They had stumbled into space barely understanding what they would find. They had met gods and monsters, and survived through luck and stubbornness, and an inability to know when they were beaten. This would be no different. "We will try," he said. "We will probably make mistakes. We will probably fail sometimes. But we will try." Sira smiled, and for a moment, Daniel saw her as she must have been before the betrayal. Young and hopeful and full of love for the cosmos she tended. That being was still there, buried beneath layers of grief and pain. Maybe one day she would fully emerge again. The crew of the Wanderer gathered on the surface of Varath 9 and watched as their captain stood beside the last architect. Above them, the coalition fleet disappeared into the distance. Around them, the dead moon remained silent and still, but something had changed. The galaxy was watching. The truth was spreading. And for the first time in 400,000 years, the future was not written in fear. Amy stepped forward and stood beside Daniel. "So what do we do now, Captain?" Daniel looked at Sira, at the single sword still buried in her chest, at the silver tears that had dried on her face so long ago. He thought about his daughter, about the war that had taken her, about all the pain and loss that had led him to this moment, and he smiled. "Now," he said, "we go home. And we tell everyone what we found. And we start building something better." Sira rose to her full height, a titan of darkness and silver light. The stars reflected in her golden eyes, and for the first time in longer than any living being could remember, she did not feel alone. She had 3 wounds in her chest. 2 had been freed, their prisoners released to peace. 1 remained, a memorial and a promise, but she also had something she had lost 400,000 years ago. She had hope God, and she had friends. The Wanderer lifted off from Varath 9, with Sira walking beside it, her steps carrying her through the void as easily as a human walked through air. Together, they turned toward the stars. The galaxy would never be the same. And that, Daniel thought as he watched the ancient titan glide through space beside his battered little ship, was exactly the point. Some stories end with victory. Some end with defeat. But the best stories, the truest stories, end with a beginning. This was their beginning, and it was only the start.